When Zonghan opened his eyes quietly, he felt his head was bursting, as if someone had knocked him hard with a beetle. He sat up with the hardwood bed beneath him, and looked around him and found a completely unfamiliar environment, the room of the carved beam painting, with thin paper pasted on the windows, and a faint smell of sandalwood in the air. "Where is this?" he muttered, rubbed his son's hole, and tried to recall his last memory. "I was obviously staying up late in the dormitory to practice dramas a moment ago, but why did I arrive in this place in the blink of an eye?" When I looked down, I saw that I was wearing a large set of ancient long robes with complex patterns on the cuffs. "Bored, have you traveled through time?" Zonghan's heart was shocked, and countless online novel routines appeared in his brain. He tried pinching his face, and he was so painful that he sucked in air, not a dream. Just when he wasn't clearing his head, a sudden burst of stomping sound came from outside the door, and the door was suddenly pushed open. A middle-aged man in a long gray shirt walked in. His face was blue and his voice was fast. "Your Highness, get up quickly. If you hear this again at the palace banquet tonight, you may be caught by His Highness Zhang Wei and we'll give you a copy of it." "Your Highness? Zhang Wei?" Zonghan was stunned, and a large number of strange memory fragments suddenly penetrated into his brain. He lowered his head and quickly digested the information, and finally understood his situation. He traveled through time to become a dynasty prince named Zonghan, ranked 9th. His mother died early, his father was not happy, and his brothers even regarded him as the horn in his eyes and wanted to kill him at any time. And that Zhang Wei was his biggest enemy, ranked 3rd, ambitious, and he was always reminded of him. "So I am a cannon fodder character." Zonghan smiled bitterly, and a desire to fight ignited in his heart. Since God gave him a second chance, he didn't want to just slimly. "Your Highness, why are you fucking me in a daze? Change your clothes quickly." The middle-aged man was obviously a veteran, and was so anxious that he was sweating profusely. He took out a set of gorgeous robe from the side and asked Zonghan to put it on. "Okay, I'll come by myself." Zonghan snatched his hands, took the clothes, and calculated the countermeasures in his brain in the flying speed plate. When he lowered his head and put on his clothes, he suddenly felt something was so uncomfortable that he reached out and took out a small toolbox. This was the golden finger he brought from modern times. When I opened it, I saw a bunch of modern gadgets such as lighters, Swiss swords, and small flashlights. "Hey, this is a life-saving thing." Zonghan sneered, and his heart calmed down a little. He quickly packed up his feelings, put on his clothes, and followed the servant to the banquet hall. The palace banquet was extremely luxurious. In the golden and blue hall, civil and military officials were arranged on both sides. On the dragon chair in the center, there was a majestic middle-aged man, who was the emperor of the dynasty. When Zonghan walked into the hall with his head down, he felt countless eyes on him, curious, disdainful, and more indifferent. "It's so late for my 9th brother. Can't you sleep?" A sharp sound came from the front. Zonghan looked up and saw a young man in a long purple and gold robe looking at him with a smile, his eyes full of ticks. This person is Zhang Wei, the 3rd child, and is now the popular choice under the crown prince. Zonghan felt nervous and made a strong decision. He smiled slightly and bowed. The 3rd brother laughed. "But my brother was a little worried on the road. I hope my father and the Lord will understand." He said this without any leakage. He was respectful on the surface, but he was not humble or arrogant. Zhang Wei snorted coldly, obviously dissatisfied with Zonghan's calm reaction, and turned his head and said a few words to the court officials next to him. Then he said loudly, "Brother 9th, I heard that your body is not suitable recently and I don't even participate in the government. Since you are here today, why not perform anything to your father and the Lord? It proves that you are so useless." "Oh no, it's because you are sick, how about it?" As soon as this happened, the palace was silent, and then a low laugh broke out. Everyone understood that Zhang Wei was deliberately provoking trouble, hoping to let Zonghan be in trouble. The so-called Prince of the Waste has long been spread throughout the court and the public. Everyone knows that Zonghan is not favored and has no such force. Zonghan stood in the middle of the hall, feeling the ridicule of the surrounding area. His face was unchanged. He knew very well that if he had failed at this time, he would only succeed and finally live up to the reputation of Huan Chai. But if you don't respond, you will become cowardly and even more looked down upon. What should I do? I can't really perform what I want to do. Zong Han's brain moved quickly, and his right hand unconsciously touched the toolbox at his waist. Suddenly, his spirit flashed and the corners of his mouth slightly swelled. Since the third brother is interested, my younger brother naturally dare not recommend it. Zong Han raised his head, his language was calm, and then he took out a small metal object from his waist. It was an ordinary lighter. With the curious eyes of the crowd, he walked slowly to a blue copper incense burner in the center of the hall, lowered his head and waved his waist, pretending to check the charcoal fire in the incense burner. Brother Ninth, what are you fucking? Are you going to make a fire for us? Zhang Wei couldn't help but rude, which caused laughter around him. Zong Han ignored these ridicule, turned his back to everyone, pressed his fingers lightly, and a click sound, and the flames of the lighter instantly burst out. He quickly poured the flames into the fragrance, and the charcoal fire inside the furnace was ignited, and the flames reflected half of his face looked a little mysterious. What is this? Some court officials couldn't help but sigh in a low voice, his face full of shock. Zong Han stood up and turned over his head. The lighter in his hand clattered again, and the flames jumped at his fingertips, reflecting that his eyes were extremely bright. He slowly looked at the whole scene, his language was calm and peaceful, carrying an unquestionable majesty. This is just a gadget. My younger brother accidentally got something that could summon flames. Today, he would use this to pray for his father, so that our country can prosper and make the country prosperous and the reign smoothly. After saying that, he pressed the lighter again, and the flames were particularly dazzling in the dim hall. Everyone was stunned for a moment. Several old ministers even stood up subconsciously and looked at the divine artifact in his hand in surprise. Zhang Wei's face turned blue in an instant. He never expected that this ninth brother, who had always been regarded as a waste of hair, could actually make this happen, instantly attracting everyone's attention. He gritted his teeth and reluctantly smiled. My ninth brother is indeed a little smart, but he is afraid that he can't get into any big shots with such small tricks, right? Zong Han smiled slightly, put away the lighter, and bowed. The third brother said yes, but my brother is just talking about his feelings. If there is anything wrong, I hope my father and the Lord will forgive me. After speaking, he retreated to his position, lowered his head and said nothing, as if that scene was just a trivial matter. However, the atmosphere in the main hall has finally changed. The court officials who were originally disdainful of Zonghan were now looking curiously, and several old ministers even whispered to the words divine fire. Although the emperor had no expression on his face, his eyes were also flashing, which was obviously a little surprised by Zonghan's performance. Zonghan sat in his position, with a calm surface, and a breath in his heart. He knew that although this hand was just a small test knives, it at least allowed him to pull out a foot from the quagmire of waste firewood. The lighter's effect is far beyond expectations, and this modern gadget is indeed his life-saving straw. The banquet continued, but Zong Han felt that the atmosphere around him became subtle. Although Zhang Wei no longer picked on others, his eyes became colder and colder, and it seemed that he had already regarded him as a real threat. Other princes and court officials also began to pay more attention to this always low-key ninth prince. Just as the banquet was approaching the end of the sound, a young man in a blue shirt quietly walked to Zong Han and said in a low voice, "Your Highness, can you take a step to speak?" Zong Han turned around and saw that he was pretty and shrewd in his eyes. His heart moved slightly, and he clicked the point, and came to the remote place in a corner of the hall with the other party. "I am leaving the voyage and I am really impressed by His Highness's followers. Today I saw His Highness shocking the whole scene with the divine fire." The man reported his home, carrying a silk of excitement in his language. "Your Highness can tell that His Highness Zhang Wei has already been in charge of private affairs in the central government of the court, and he has great strength. If he had not prepared early, His Highness may have life-threatening." After hearing this, Zong Han felt a little confused and asked without hesitation, "Oh? What are the advantages of Mr. Qihang?" The low voice of the air pressure sounded, and his eyes flashed with a sudden conclusion. Since your highness has a magical object, why not use it as a means to win people's hearts? Although your highness Zhang Wei is strong, his heart is volatile. If your highness can show more means, he will definitely be able to attract a group of loyal ministers and compete with them. I am willing to serve your highness as a dog horse and help your highness change his fate. Zonghan heard this and felt excited. He knew that his journey of travel had truly begun from this moment. Although the road ahead is full of danger, with this toolbox in hand and the help of a scholar like Kahang, he may not be able to be as good as Zhang Wei. Okay, since Mr. Qihang has this heart, I, Zonghan, will not be in danger. Zonghan responded in a low voice, a touch of fighting spirit ignited in his eyes. From today, we will work together, and we will definitely let this palace know that Zonghan is definitely a waste. Qihang smiled slightly and bowed. Your highness is wise, and I will do my best. The night was getting deeper, and the lights in the hall were still bright, but a warmer flame ignited in Zonghan's heart. He knew that this was just the beginning, the real storm, and he was waiting for him behind him. After the banquet ended, Zonghan returned to his palace and couldn't calm down for a long time. The night was dark, and the moonlight outside the window penetrated into the house through the thin wavy, reflecting the copper lenses on the table with a cold light. He sat on the edge of the bed, holding the small toolbox in his hand, and his brain was full of what Qihang said last. To win people's hearts and compete with Zhang Wei. Zonghan said in a low voice, his eyes calmed down. He knew very well that his current situation was like walking on a steel wire, and if he was not careful, he would be in danger of death. Zhang Wei's strength has been deeply rooted, and he, like a Wu prince, has no team like him. If you want to flip the plate, it is not enough to just rely on a lighter, you must have real strength. Just as he was thinking, a light knocking sound came from outside the door, and then the sound of Kaihang was low. Your highness, can you speak conveniently? Come in. Zonghan put away the toolbox and looked up at the door. The storm pushed the door in, and there was a solemnity on his face. After he closed the door, he quickly walked to Zonghan and said in a low voice, Your Highness, your performance at the banquet has indeed shocked many people, but it also angered His Highness Zhang Wei. I just got the news that he had sent someone to secretly monitor your palace, and I am afraid he would not be willing to give up. Zonghan glanced at the head and said in a deep voice, Are you going to act quickly? Are you going to kill me directly? Qihang shook his head and analyzed, No, your Highness Zhang Wei is very cunning, and directly acts will make the population worse. He is more likely to use some tricks, such as sending assassins to try, or creating some troubles, which will make the father disappointed you. Your Highness, we must first take action. Is it strong to start first? Zonghan raised his eyebrows and signaled that Qihang would continue to speak. A flash of light flashed in Qihang's eyes and said in a low voice, Your Highness, your divine fire has made many court officials curious. If you can take this opportunity to show more means, you will definitely attract a group of people. According to my opinion, it is better to start from the border. Those people have been guarding the border for many years, and have not come much from the power of the court, and are not so loyal to His Highness Zhang Wei's strength. If your Highness can give them some benefits, he may be able to use it for you. After Zonghan heard this, a sudden light flashed in his brain. He stood up, paced around the house, then stopped and asked, The border will lead, what do they lack the most? Qihang thought for a while and replied, Of course it is military equipment and grass. The border is bitter and cold, and the imperial court's grants are often taken by private bags. The soldiers' weapons are mostly damaged, and their fighting power is not as good as before. If your Highness can solve this problem, he will definitely win their loyalty. Military. Zonghan lowered his head and pondered, and some modern simple craft knowledge suddenly appeared in his brain. Although he is not a big engineer, he has been to college and remembers some basic metallurgy and mechanical principles. He clapped his hands and squinted at the corner of his mouth. Kaihang, I have a solution for this matter. However, before we can pull people's hearts, we have to solve Zhang Wei's trial first. Do you think he might send an assassin? Starting the flight point, yes, according to his character, I will definitely try your deep clean first. Your Highness, we must be on guard early. Zonghan sneered and took out a Swiss sword from his toolbox, and the sword was covered with cold light. In the stunning gaze, he pressed the blade lightly, and then changed into a small steel and a screw knife, which was so numerous that it was dazzling. "What is this?" Qihang's eyes widened, his face full of shock. "This is called a Swiss military sword, which is a tool of all kinds." Zonghan smiled, then put away the military sword. His eyes turned cold. "Zhang Wei wants to send someone to try it out, so let him see. I, Zonghan, are not easy to mess with. Kaihang, go prepare some fine sluts and wooden sticks. I will teach you how to make a simple trap to ensure that those assassins will never come back." Although Qihang didn't quite understand what the trap means, he was full of confidence and did not dare to ask too much. He even took a quick response and turned around to prepare the materials. That night, Zonghan and Qihang worked around the palace for half a night. Zonghan used the scallops and blades of the Swiss sword to process the fine skeletons and wooden sticks into a simple foot trap, and buried several pointed wooden thorns in the corner of the palace wall. Although these things look inconspicuous, they are extremely fatal in the dark, and if you are not careful, you will be able to eat a lot of money. "Your Highness, can this really work?" Qihang wiped the sweat from his head and looked at the inconspicuous fine lines on the ground half-believingly. Zonghan grinned and said, "Don't worry, this thing is a life-saving method in the wild. No matter how bad the assassins are, they can't defend against such small tricks. Let's stay tonight and see what Zhang Wei can do." Sure enough, in the middle of the night, a few light responses suddenly came outside the palace. Zonghan and Qihang looked at each other, quickly hid behind the window, and watched the static outside with breathing and concentration. "Your Highness, it's true." Qihang was shocked and held the wooden stick in his hand tightly. "Don't worry, look forward to the situation." Zonghan sniffed, and there was a chill in his eyes. The three men in black obviously had a good training and were extremely light in their movements, and they almost didn't make any sounds. However, when they approached the back door of the palace, one of them suddenly fell into a hole and was pulled in a flash. The wooden thorn next to him popped up and directly stabbed his calf. "Ah!" The man couldn't help but let out a low voice, and immediately covered his legs and fell to the ground, thrusting in pain. "Who?" The other two were surprised and quickly drew their swords and rings, but before they could react, another trap was touched, and several wooden sticks were smashed from the side, hitting one of them in the back of the brain, and smashing him directly. The last man in black saw that his actions were not good, so he turned around and wanted to run away, but how could Zonghan make him feel as willing? He quickly rushed out of the room, holding the Swiss sword in his hand, and caught up with the man several times. The blade flashed and the cold light hit the other party's neck. "Don't act. I'm not polite to run." Zonghan shouted coldly, with unquestionable majesty in his voice. The man in black froze in place, sweating profusely. He certainly did not expect that the Prince of the Wilderness mentioned in the story was such a skill. He gritted his teeth and said in a low voice, "Who are you? Why are there such weird connections in this yard?" Zonghan sneered, and the blade pressed slightly. "It doesn't matter who I am. What's important is, who are you sent? Otherwise, this knife will not be too big." The man's face was pale. After a moment of hesitation, he finally said in a low voice, "Yes, it was the third prince who asked us to come. He said that as long as he tried to explore you, it would be best if he could succeed. If he didn't have to force himself. It's indeed Zhang Wei." Zonghan's heart was cold, not surprising. He put away his sword and turned his head to the channel. "Please these guys up and send them to the Imperial front tomorrow morning." He said that someone was going to the palace at night, and the idea was not clear. "I want to see how Zhang Wei explained it." When Qihang was busy, he found the three of them to hang out in a sensation. Then he asked in a low voice, "Your Highness, if this matter is in front of your father, Your Highness Zhang Wei will probably be punished twice. He may even bite him back, saying that His Highness deliberately framed the situation." Zonghan held his hand and saw a sly look in his eyes. "Don't worry, he can't push it clean. I have a way to make him eat yellow, but I can't tell you if you have any trouble." The next morning, Zonghan took Qihang and escorted 3 assassins to the imperial bookroom. He told the story of last night in front of the emperor and a variety of court officials. Zhang Wei was naturally at the scene. When he heard this, his face changed slightly and quickly calmed down. He bowed and said, "Father, I'm afraid what my 9th brother said is a mistake. Maybe these people are just sluts. What do you have to do with the ministers? Besides, how could the 9th brother's palace have such a subtle connection? Isn't it because he had prepared for it and deliberately set up the bureau?" After hearing this, Zonghan was not panicked and turned his head to bow to the emperor, saying respectfully, "Father, what the 3rd brother said is not unreasonable, but the officials in the palace are nothing but gadgets, purely for self-protection. If it weren't for these officials last night, the officials would have been killed. These people had a clear confession and said they were instructed by the 3rd brother. If the father did not believe it, they could ask for it themselves." The emperor had no expression on his face, his eyes returned between Zonghan and Zhang Wei, and then he said in a deep voice, "Come on, take these 3 people down and give them a serious review." Zhang Wei was nervous and dared not say much, so he could only lower his head and respond. Zonghan secretly relaxed his voice, knowing that he had calmed down in this game. Although the emperor may not have punished Zhang Wei directly, at least he had eaten a slap and made the people in the court see their own methods. In the next few days, with the suggestion of Qihang, Zonghan began to secretly contact the border leader. He specially selected a military officer named Li Yaoshan, who has been guarding the northern border for many years, is upright, has no connection with the power of the court, and is an excellent target for polling the country. On that day, Zonghan met with Li Zishan at a remote restaurant outside the city. After the 2 of them sat down, Zonghan didn't say anything. He took out a sketch from his toolbox and pushed it to Li Yaoshan. He opened the door to see the mountain and said, "Li Zhang's army has heard that the northern Xinjiang army is insufficient, and the soldiers' weapons are mostly damaged. I have some ideas, which may help you solve this problem." Li Zishan was stunned. When he took the grass picture, he saw a strange crossbow arrow structure painted on it. The arrow was triangular and some strange symbols were marked next to it. He browsed and said, "Your Highness, what is this? It looks like a crossbow arrow, but how can the structure be so weird?" Zonghan smiled and explained, "This is called a triangular arrow, which is more severe than an ordinary arrow, and it is simple to make. You only need to change the ironwork slightly to produce. I also have some methods to make the ironwork more durable. If you are interested in the army, you might as well bring a few iron craftsmen to try it." Li Zishan heard this and saw a flash of surprise in his eyes. He fought all year round and understood the importance of military service best. If Zonghan said it was true, this was undoubtedly a great thing for the northern Xinjiang army. He immediately clapped the table and said, "Okay. If your Highness really has this method, you will finally be loyal. I will bring people to try tomorrow. If you can accomplish something, everyone in the northern border will be your Highness." Zonghan smiled slightly, feeling secretly happy. He knew that this was just the first step, but at least it was a key thing. With Li Yaoshan's trust, his little power has always become shady. However, the good times didn't last long. On the 3rd day of the reform of Zonghan and Li Yaoshan's military service, a shocking news suddenly came from the court. Someone in the army in the northern border rebelled, and said that he was instructed by the 9th Prince Zonghan, intending to overthrow the court. As soon as the news came out, the emperor was furious and ordered the investigation into the matter. When Zonghan received the news, his face instantly sank. He found Qihang in the first time and said in a deep voice, "This matter is definitely something Zhang Wei did. Northern Xinjiang just began to trust me. He wanted to use a knife to kill someone and let his father wipe me out directly." Qihang also tightened his eyebrows and analyzed, "Your Highness, Zhang Wei's move is indeed cruel. He must have bought a young man from northern Xinjiang, and sent a complaint, and then gave it to you. Now that the voice has risen, the whole court is discussing this matter. If you don't clear the suspicion as soon as possible, your Highness may be very bad." Zonghan gritted his teeth and his brain moved quickly. Suddenly, he took out a small guide sign from his toolbox, his eyes lit up. "Kai Hang, I have a way. Zhang Wei wants to play with him, so I let him lift a stone and smash his feet. On that day, Zong Han took the initiative to ask for an order and took Qi Hong and a team to go to northern Xinjiang to investigate the counter-investment. After arriving in the northern border, he did not directly question the so-called rebels, but secretly investigated the evidence and found that there was a very secret tag on the so-called counter-letter. The tag was very similar to a seal from Zhang Wei's palace. "It's him," Zong Han sneered, and then used the guide to accurately locate the secret valley with his leader, and discovered the dead soldiers sent by Zhang Wei to disguise the rebels. When these people saw Xingjian, they wanted to escape immediately, but were trapped by the trap that Zong Han had prepared for a long time and were all captured. Finally, Zong Han brought these dead soldiers and certificates back to the court, exposing Zhang Wei's traits in the face of the emperor and the civil and military officials of the court. He held the guide sign and talked eruditely. "Father, I have found something that can distinguish the direction, and it is called the guide sign. It is this thing that helps the ministers find the place where the rebels hide and reveal the truth. What I say is that someone is marrying the marriage, intending to frame the minister, so please let the father take a closer look." The emperor heard this and glanced at Zhang Wei, with a chill in his eyes. Zhang Wei's face was blue and had no reversal. He could only lower his head and acknowledge the mistake, saying that he was unhard to discipline and let his subordinates do such stupid things. In the end, although the emperor did not directly punish Zhang Wei, he clearly changed his attitude towards Zong Han and even ordered some of his gold and silver wealth to show his comfort. When people in the court saw the situation and discussed it, the ninth prince was indeed not a thing in the pool, and even Zhang Wei's traits could be understood, but they should not be underestimated. After returning to the palace, Zong Han Chang breathed a sigh of relief, sat on the chair, and finally showed a burst of fatigue on his face. Qi Hong stood aside, unable to hide his excitement, and said in a low voice, "Your Highness, this time, not only has he cleared the suspicion, but Zhang Wei also ate a big shot. The people in the court have a very different view of you. Coupled with Li Zishan's allegiance, your Highness's strength has begun to take shape." Zong Han clicked a little, and there was a little more coldness in his eyes. "This is just the beginning. After Zhang Wei eats it, he will definitely not be able to stop being ruthless. I am afraid there will be more ruthless tricks next. To start the flight, we have to speed up our pace and pull more people, otherwise we will be unable to stand firm at all." Qi Hong bowed his hand and said, "Don't worry, Your Highness, I'm making up my mind to do my best." The night was deeper. Zong Han looked at the moonlight outside the window, held the toolbox in his hand, and a stronger ambition aroused in his heart. He knew that his backward path had just begun. Although Zhang Wei's sarcasm was broken, the greater storm was waiting for him ahead. The night was as bright as ink, and the fire in the palace swayed slightly, reflecting Zong Han's face half light and half dark. He sat at the table, holding a rough map in his hand, his eyebrows tightly locked. The map marks several fortresses in the northern border, one of which is called Blackstone City. It is located very important and is the first line of defense to attack foreign enemies. However, in recent days, news from the central government of the Republic of Korea that Blackstone City was trapped by an unknown enemy. The defender Li Yaoshan led his troops to resist. After a long period of time, the grass in the city was in a hurry and his situation was in danger. "Your Highness, this matter is strange." Qi Hong stood aside, his temperament was low. "The Blackstone City is a key point. If the enemy is not in line, how could it suddenly launch an attack? What's more, His Highness Zhang Wei has recently had a secret meeting with several important officials in the Korean Republic. I'm afraid he is doing something." Zong Han sneered, put down the map, raised his head and said, "No need to guess. It's probably Zhang Wei's hand. He was upset when I saw me pulling Li Yaoshan in northern Xinjiang, so he simply joined forces with foreign enemies and wanted to use a knife to kill people, and he would get rid of the power of Blackstone City and me. He played very well with this trick." The starting point was a little bit and said in a deep voice, "What your Highness said is very true. But now Blackstone City is in danger. If you do not rescue as soon as possible, Li Zishan and the northern Xinjiang army will probably be devastated, and your trust in your Highness will be greatly reduced. We must act." Zonghan stood up and paced around the house, flying in his brain to calculate the countermeasures. He knew very well that this time was not only a problem of saving Black Rock City, but also a key battle with Zhang Wei. If it can be successfully resolved, it will not only stabilize the power of the northern border, but also make the people in the court look at each other with admiration. But if it fails, the previous hope will probably disperse. Qihang, prepare for it. Let's go to Blackstone City by yourself. Zonghan stopped his foot and his eyes were calm. Zhang Wei wants to see me laugh, so I'll let him know what it means to lift a stone and smash his feet. Qihang was stunned and immediately bowed. Your Highness is in charge of his military service, and he will definitely boost his military spirit. I will arrange the manpower here and set out tomorrow morning. The next morning, Zonghan took a team of heroes and soldiers to leave the capital in a vast and powerful way and head to the Haishi city in the northern border. The people who traveled were also Qihang and several scouts selected from Li Zishan's subordinates. These people were very familiar with the terrain of the northern border and could provide Zonghan with first-hand information. Along the way, Zonghan did not slacken. He took out a small notebook from his toolbox, which recorded some basic war art knowledge from modern learning, such as terrain utilization, night flying strategies, etc. Although these knowledge is just a theory in the course of the book in modern times, in this era of cold weapons, it is enough to become a weapon to reverse the war. He looked through the notes and discussed with Qihang how to break the enemy, striving to realize every advantage. Your Highness, your little book is such a magical thing. Qihang looked at the notebook in Zonghan's hand and was surprised. These fighting techniques written above are unspeakable. If they can be used, the enemy may not be able to defend themselves. Zonghan smiled, closed the notebook, and said, "This is just a little trick. What is really bad depends on the execution. When we arrive in Blackstone City, we must first find out the enemy's foundation and then make plans." After several days of emergency, Zonghan and his party finally arrived at a valley 10 miles outside Haishi City. This place is steep and easy to defend and difficult to attack, and is a must-see path to Blackstone City. However, the scouts soon brought back a bad news. The enemy had already ambushed here, with about 3,000 horses, blocking the exit of the valley, obviously trying to cut off the connection between the aid troops and Blackstone City. Your Highness, although there are not many enemy troops, the terrain is very beneficial to them. If we attack, we will definitely lose a lot. Qihang looked at the map with his eyebrows tightly. What's more, the grass in Blackstone City has been gone. If we delay any further, we may not be able to defend it. Zonghan was silent for a moment, then took out a bundle of fine sluices and a small flashlight from the toolbox, and slid it on the corner of his mouth. Strong attack is not possible, but we can come and have a different kind of thing. Start the flight and send orders. All the members will rest tonight, take a rest, and take good care of themselves, and act during the night. I have a way to catch the enemy off guard. Although Qihang didn't understand the medicine sold in Zonghan's gourd, he was confident and did not dare to ask too much, so he immediately went down to issue the order. That night, the moon was dark and the wind was high, and the valley was quiet. Zonghan brought a team of carefully selected training and quietly approached the enemy ambush point without any notice. He held the small flashlight in his hand, and the faint light flashed through the darkness, pointing the direction for the team. Although these trivialities were surprised by this divine light, they had already been accustomed to Zonghan's various strange means, and no one spoke much, but just followed silently. Your Highness, there are the enemy's whistle ahead, with about a dozen people guarding it. A scout said in a low voice, pointing at a few faint fires from a distance. Zonghan clicked the head and said in a low voice, "Okay, follow the plan. You can do it a few, take the rope and roam to the side wings. Remember, don't fight hard, just count one. Others attract attention from me, and fight quickly." After saying that, he took out a Swiss sword from his toolbox, pressed it lightly, and the blade popped out, and then he brought several soldiers to the whistle. "Who is there?" The enemy of the whistleblow finally realized something unusual. A guard shouted loudly, drew out his long sword, and rushed towards Zonghan. However, without taking a few steps, he was knocked down by the fine slut on the ground, and he threw a dog into a shit. He flew out with a long knife and made a sound of crispness. Evil! Evil! Other guards were shocked, and they picked up their weapons and rushed over. There were more hidden traps to greet them. For a while, the shouts of shouting came one after another, and the enemy soldiers were in a turbulent manner, and they could not form an effective counterattack. Go! Zong Han shouted softly, and pulled out with his wife. The Swiss sword in his hand flashed a cold light, accurately cutting off an enemy's weapon belt, and kicked him down with one foot. The other disciples were greatly encouraged, and they followed suit and quickly subdued all the enemy soldiers at the whistle. Your Highness, this is too smooth. A man was filled with his face and wiped his sweat from the bottom of his head, unable to help but feel shocked. Zong Han put away his sword and smiled faintly. This is just the first step. The main force of the enemy is still at the back. We have to continue pushing forward while they have not reacted. Send orders, clean up the battlefield, and prepare for a large-scale night battle. That night, Zong Han used the night to cover up and led his subordinates to launch a large-scale enemy army. He used the terrain in advance to set up multiple traps around the enemy, and used the light of the small flashlight as the signal to accurately guide the subordinates to break into batches. The enemy was caught off guard and was caught off guard. The inside was in a group. Many soldiers were even chopped over to the ground by Zong Han's subordinates before they even put on their armor. Retreat! Retreat! The enemy leader saw that De Jing had left and shouted and ordered his retreat, but how could Zong Han make them feel willful? He took his team to chase and force the enemy into the deep valley, and finally he was almost gone. When the sky was getting dark, the battle in the valley ended. Zong Han stood on a high slope, looking at the faraway Blackstone city, and breathed out a breath. The Hang beside him was full of admiration and said in a low voice, Your Highness, this battle is really amazing. The enemy of 3,000 troops was defeated by less than 500 of us. If it were not for the personal eyes, I would never believe it. Zong Han tried to sway and said calmly, This is just a matter of using the advantages of terrain and night. The real tough battle is still in Blackstone City. Let's go, we have to enter the city tightly and get along with Li Yaoshan. In Blackstone City, the atmosphere was full of destruction. The city wall was filled with traces left by swords and arrows. The guards were exhausted and many people were wearing rough cloth, which seemed to be very weak. When Zong Han brought his subordinates into the city, Li Zishan came out. His face was full of excitement, and he knelt down. Your Highness is here to help, I will be grateful. If it weren't for your Highness, Blackstone City would have been ruined. Zong Han quickly helped Li Zishan up, patted his shoulder, and smiled and said, Li Yan's army is so serious. Blackstone City is a barrier in the northern border, how can I ignore it? Moreover, the enemy has been beaten by us, and there is no threat outside the city anymore. We are in urgent need of our efforts to calm the army and treat the injured. He said that he took out a small first aid kit from his toolbox, which contained alcohol, cotton, cloth, and some basic medicines. He thought he had handled injuries for several seriously injured soldiers, and his actions were sophisticated and meticulous that he attracted the attention of the soldiers around him. Your Highness, what is this? It can stop bleeding so quickly. Li Zishan was surprised as he looked at Zong Han using alcohol cotton to disinfect the wound and then wrapped the cloth with a cloth. Zong Han smiled and said, This is just a small trick, specially used to save lives. There are many injured soldiers in the city. You can use these things to separate them so that the military doctor can handle them according to my method and ensure that many people can be saved. Li Yaoshan was very impressed, and he felt a little more admiration for Zong Han. He immediately ordered the first aid kit to be distributed. When the soldiers in the city saw the situation, they were all grateful and shouted the Ninth Highness's benevolence, and their voices were heard from the head of the city. In the next few days, Zong Han stayed in Blackstone City, working with Li Yaoshan to build the city defense. He also used modern knowledge to teach soldiers to create simple fortifications, such as digging pits and laying out nets, which greatly improved the city's defense capabilities. The soldiers in the city saw that he was not only brave and wise, but also had a sense of talent. He was full of gratitude and hoped to reach the top in a while. However, just as Blackstone City gradually recovered its vitality, a more malfunctioning news came. A larger enemy suddenly appeared in the northern border, with about tens of thousands of people coming towards Blackstone City. At the same time, there was also a voice from the court. Jiang Wei publicly accused Zong Han of pacifying troops privately, which led to chaos in the northern border, and even suggested that the emergence of this enemy army could not interfere with Zonghan. "Your Highness, Jiang Wei is so heartbroken that he wants to kill you." Qihan heard the news and his face was bright. The scale of this enemy army is far beyond the previous scale, and it is definitely not something that ordinary tribes can adjust. It must be that he secretly joined forces with foreign enemies and wants to use this to get rid of you. Zonghan sat at the head of the city, looking at the horizon far away, his eyes cold. He was jumping into the wall in a hurry. When I fought in Black Rock City, I ruined his good things, so he naturally was unwilling to accept it. Since I dared to play so big this time, I can't disappoint him. Start the flight, send orders, and the whole city will be on guard and ready to fight. The starting point should be reached, and then go and arrange it immediately. But he knew very well that the difficulty of this battle was far ahead. There are many enemies and they are here to fight. If there is no strange plan, fighting hard will only lead to two mistakes. Zonghan clearly understood this. He returned to the city, opened the map, and carefully studied the surrounding terrain. Suddenly, his eyes fell on a narrow valley, called the Tiger Island, and the territory was extremely steep. On both sides were high-profile cliffs, with only a narrow path for access, which was the only way for the enemy to attack Blackstone City. "I have it." Zonghan slapped the table, and a glimmer of light flashed in his eyes. When the enemy wants to attack the city, they must pass through the Tiger Island. We might as well wait for the enemy to wait for the battle, set up here, and come to close the door to beat the dog. When Qihan heard this, his eyes lit up. "What does your Highness mean, to use the terrain and impound the enemy?" "It's okay." Zonghan pointed his head, took out a bundle of fine sashes and a few small irons from his toolbox, and continued, "The land here is narrow, and no matter how many enemy troops there are, they cannot be used. We can set traps on both sides of the ice valley, use ropes and stones to create rockfalls, and then send a team of elite troops to ambush them. After the enemy troops come in, they will slam the front and back, so that they will not come back." When the hunting heard the news, he clapped his hands and said, "Your Highness's plan is really clever. I'll arrange the manpower here, and I must let the enemy get a big shot." That night, Zonghan led his own team and placed a rush in the Tiger Island. He used fine laces and irons to hang a large number of stone blocks on the cliffs on both sides of the ice valley. He could create large-scale rockfalls with just one pole cable. At the same time, he also sent Li Zishan to lead a team of elite troops to ambush at the exit of the Yacht Valley, preparing to stop the enemy's back. After everything was ready, Zonghan stood at the height of the Imperial Valley, looking at the enemy's fire far away, and his mouth slightly raised. "Jiang Wei, I want to see what else do you have to do." The next morning, the enemy indeed entered the army as expected and broke into the Tiger's siege. They obviously were not familiar with the terrain, and the team was very long, and the forwards just entered the valley, while the back team was still several miles away. Zonghan saw the situation and finally ordered, "Let it go." With a command, the wisdom on the cliff suddenly pulled the rope, and the huge stone block fell from the sky and smashed hard towards the enemy army. For a while, the enemy was smashed and overturned, and the team was in an instant. "Shoot! Don't leave one!" Zonghan pulled out his waist and shouted loudly, carrying his subordinates from both sides of the I Valley, and fighting with the enemy in close combat. At the same time, Li Yaoshan was also killed from the exit of the Yegu Valley, blocking the enemy's retreat, and trapping him in the Yegu Valley and unable to move. In this battle, the enemy's troops were unable to resist. The troops of thousands were divided and surrounded, and in the end, less than 1,000 people suddenly fled, and the remaining few were almost gone. Zonghan stood in the middle of the battle, his body covered in blood, his eyes were bright, and there was an unquestionable sense of majesty. "Your Highness is mighty. Your Highness is mighty." The soldiers shouted loudly, and the sound was shocking, and the echoes in the mid-valley remained unchanged for a long time. Zonghan walked forward and was full of excitement. "Your Highness, this battle is a great victory, and the enemy has no strength to fight again, and Blackstone City is completely unhappy. More importantly, your hope is probably to be spread throughout the northern border." Zonghan clicked a little, but he didn't show too much joy. He knew very well that although this battle was won beautifully, the real enemy was still waiting for him in the capital. If Zhang Wei fails to connect, he will definitely not be able to be willing to rest, and he will no longer be able to sit and wait. Chang the heir, send orders to clean up the battlefield, and constrain the death. Zonghan said in a deep voice. In addition, I will send someone to write a detailed report on the battle and send it back to the capital. I want my father to know that the safety of the northern border was guarded by my Zonghan. A few days later, the news of the great victory of the Tiger Island was sent back to the capital, and the government and the country were shocked. All civil and military officials discussed the dispute. The 9th Prince Zonghan was not only wise and brave, but also able to win more with less, which was a blessing for the dynasty. When the emperor heard the memorial, he smiled rarely. When the crowd praised Zonghan for the style of a great prince, he ordered the prize of 2,000 gold coins to show his honor. When Zhang Wei heard the news, his face was so dark that it could almost drip out of water. He stood in his palace, threw the teacup to the ground, gritted his teeth and said, "Zonghan, how could this waste be such a means?" The group of wastes in the northern border, the troops of all the people, were beaten to the end of the army. A confidant beside him spoke cautiously, "Your Highness, Zonghan is indeed a bit strange, and even foreign enemies have no choice but to deal with him. Now he is looking forward to becoming a big hit in the northern border. If he doesn't control himself, he may become a big trouble." Zhang Wei snorted coldly, his eyes cold. "Pressure? Your Highness has not only suppressed him, I want him to disappear in the end. Send the order, summon all his confidants, and prepare for a last try. I want to see how long can he be saved." At the same time, Zonghan brought his subordinates back to the court with him. He heard the sound of the Korean Central Committee along the way, and had already guessed that Zhang Wei would not be able to rush his hands easily. After returning to the capital, he did not rush to enter the palace to meet the sacred temple, but first had a secret relationship with Qihang and was ready to fight Zhang Wei's final rebellion. "Your Highness, Zhang Wei's status is already in danger, and he will definitely be in a desperate situation." Qihang analyzed in a low voice, "As far as he sees, he may be in trouble in the court, and directly accused you of rebellion and forced your father to wipe you out." Zonghan pointed a little and sneered, "If he really dares to do this, then I don't mind giving him a shot. Qihang, what's the evidence you secretly collected over the past few days?" Qihang took out a letter from his sleeve, sent it to Zonghan, and said in a low voice, "Your Highness, this is a proof of Zhang Wei's connection with the foreign enemy. Although it is not complete, it is enough to make the father suspicious. As long as the time is suitable, it will definitely be fatal." Zonghan received the letter and glanced briefly, and the corner of his mouth slightly raised. "Okay, these things will make Zhang Wei drink. Tomorrow, I will force myself to the palace to let him know what it means to eat bad results." The next day at the court meeting, Zonghan walked into the hall with his head held high. As soon as he entered the hall, Zhang Wei couldn't wait to stand out. His lingering words, "Father, although the 9th brother made a contribution to the northern border, his private army was promoted and he acted without authorization, and he actually had the intention of being unjust. What's more, the enemy troops in the northern border suddenly came and could not get rid of the 9th brother." The minister asked the father to investigate the matter to the court. As soon as this statement was made, the court was silent, and many court officials agreed, which was obviously someone who had already bought it. Zonghan was not panicked, and stepped forward and bowed, "Father, what the 3rd brother said is purely a trap. In the war in the northern border, the ministers defended the Blackstone City with few strengths and kept our dynasty safe. Everyone in the world can prove it. However, the 3rd brother instructed others to frame me again, and even did not hesitate to confront foreign enemies, intending to harm brothers and sisters. How could he not investigate such actions?" Speaking, he took out the letters collected by Zong from his sleeve and raised them high, with a loud voice. "Father, these letters are the iron certificates that the third brother and the foreign enemy are connected. If the father does not believe it, he can send someone to check it out, and the truth will be revealed." Zhang Wei saw this and his face turned pale in an instant, and he quickly explained, "Father, these are just things created by Zong Han. How can they be true? My minister is loyal, and the world can be grasped." However, the emperor's eyes became colder. He took the letter, took a closer look, and then snorted coldly, "Zhang Wei, if this matter is found to be false, I will not give up. Come on, send the letter to the Ministry of Justice for strict verification." Zhang Wei spoke in his speech, and he was sweating profusely, so he didn't dare to say more. Zonghan stood aside, his eyes cold, and he felt a sense of overlordhood. He knew that in this game, he had completely suppressed Zhang Wei, and his position on the other side was probably going to plummet. After the court dispersed, Zonghan returned to the palace and breathed a sigh of relief. Zhang stood aside, smiling with his face, "Your Highness, Zhang Wei has no strength to turn over this time. Next, as long as you work harder, your position will definitely be able to be improved to the next level." Zonghan clicked a little, looked far away, and his lingering words were fixed. "This is just the beginning. What I want is not only the pressure of the downward slap, but let the entire dynasty know my Zonghan's name. Start the flight, prepare well, and the next road will be long." After the court meeting, Zonghan returned to the palace. Although it was calm on the surface, his heart was like a storm. He knew that today's exchange in the court was just a prelude to the battle with Zhang Wei. Although those letters made the emperor suspicious, Zhang Wei had been in the court for many years and had a deep foundation. Just complaining about these certificates was not enough to bring him down. If you want to be fatal, you must seize the final opportunity, unite with all the forces that can be united, and kill Zhang Wei's crimes in the court. Your Highness, although Zhang Wei lost his temper today, he will not sit and wait. Zhang stood aside, his eyebrows were locked, and his words were filled with a sense of grief. As far as I know, he has contacted several important officials in secret, and may even use private soldiers to prepare to bet a single shot. We must act as fast as possible, otherwise there will be no harm in the future. Zonghan pointed a little, his eyes cold. I know. What he is the best at is dying and slapping. The more he gets close, the more dangerous it is. However, this is also our chance. Zhang, you said before, how many old ministers in the court have been dissatisfied with Zhang Wei's actions? Can there be a specific person to choose? A flash of gleam in Zhang's eyes and said in a low voice, yes. Lord Zhang Shuang of the Ministry of Personnel and Lord Zhou of the Ministry of War, both are veterans in the court. They are disgusted with Zhang Wei's behavior of hooking up foreign enemies and tying up private parties. They are just under his power and dare not object to them publicly. If His Highness can enter the door with his own interests, he will definitely convince them to stand here. Zonghan heard this and said a little, okay. If these two people can be used by me, the sound in the court will be enough. In addition, Li Zishan from the northern border must also be sent to the court. The army in his hand is my biggest trump card, and he can directly suppress Zhang Wei's private soldiers when necessary. When the flight starts, you can immediately repair a book and order Li Zishan to secretly bring 3,000 elite soldiers to the capital to prepare for the need for timely needs. Zhang quickly responded and then asked, Your Highness, the crime of catching foreign enemies is still not as good as a mountain of iron certificates. If he buys the Ministry of Justice, it will probably make a big deal worse. We have to add another fire. Zonghan was silent for a moment, then took out a thin piece of paper from the toolbox, recording some modern-day listening and scar-making skills. He sneered, Don't worry, I have a way to keep his crimes hidden. You go and prepare some people and keep an eye on the silence near Zhang Wei's palace, especially his arrival with those foreign envoys. As long as you catch a handle, I can leave him with 100 worries. That night, Zonghan went out to the horse and secretly visited Lord Zhang Shu of the Ministry of Personnel and Lord Zhou of the Ministry of War with several letters. Instead of taking the prince's heirs, he treated each other with kindness and detailed the crimes of Zhang Wei's conspiracy of external enemies and intentions to harm brothers and sisters. He also promised that if things were done, he would definitely use the two to jointly support the government. Lord Wang is old and upright. After hearing Zonghan's words, he immediately slapped and said, "If what the Ninth Highness said is true, I will definitely help you with all your strength." Zhang Wei, who has relied on his power in fishing the people over the years, would have long punished him. Although Lord Zhou was more cautious, he finally agreed to see Zonghan was kind and blessed with the reputation of the victory in the northern frontier. "Since your highness has this intention, I am willing to serve the dog and horse. But this matter is very widespread. I hope your highness will be cautious and not let the villain succeed." Zonghan saw the two of them express their feelings, and was very calm and bowed. "Don't worry, sir, I, Zonghan, will not be in danger. The court meeting in 3 days is the time to fight. I also asked the two to come and stand up and expose Zhang Wei's crimes with me." At the same time, Qihang brought several elite spies and was trapped near Zhang Wei's palace. He used some simple listening skills taught by Zonghan to finally intercept a key secret meeting. As expected, Zhang Wei secretly negotiated with a foreign envoy, preparing to launch private soldiers after the DPRK meeting, forcing the palace to entrust the power, and promised to cede the 3 cities in the northern border as a reward after the matter was completed. The news was recorded by the Ihang, and he stole a secret letter from the messenger, which detailed Zhang Wei's promise and specific plan. "Your Highness, Zhang Wei can't escape this time." Qihang returned to the palace and reported the secret letter and the content he heard to Zonghan, full of joy. "With this letter, plus the previous letters, his crimes are on the iron plate, and no one can save him." Zonghan received the secret letter and looked carefully. His eyes became colder. "Okay, Zhang Wei is seeking death by himself." Kaihang informed Li Zishan that he would enter Beijing early tomorrow morning and set up his troops in front of the court. "If Zhang Wei really dares to use private troops, we will use our teeth to replenish our teeth." 3 days later, the DPRK will hold its scheduled performance. The atmosphere inside the hall was extremely intense, with civil and military officials standing on both sides. The emperor sat on a dragon chair, staring at the crowd with expressionless face. Zonghan was wearing a military outfit, standing with his head held high, with an unquestionable sense of majesty in his eyes. Zhang Wei stood on the other side, although he was calm on the surface, but there was a hint of anxiety in his eyes. "Father, I have something to report." Zhang Wei opened his mouth first, and his voice was loud. "Although my 9th brother Zonghan made great contributions in the northern border, his actions became more domineering, privately regulating the army, and acting without authorization, and even suspected of the contrary. The Ministry of Justice had found out the day before yesterday that the so-called letters of infecting foreign enemies were purely fabricated, which was obviously because the 9th brother deliberately framed him. My minister asked my father to wipe out his position as prince to take the court. As soon as this statement was made, the court held a discussion and many Zhang Wei's party members agreed, and his voice was extremely huge for a while. Zonghan was not panicked, and stepped forward and bowed. "Father, what my 3rd brother said is purely a trap. My ministers fought bloody battles in the northern border, defended the Blackstone city, and ensured that our dynasty is safe. Everyone in the world can prove it. However, the 3rd brother, who confronted foreign enemies and intended to rebel, had already been proved like a mountain of crimes, and I hope my father will clearly observe it." He said that he took out the newly obtained secret letter from his sleeve and raised it high. The soundtrack was powerful. "Father, this is the secret letter between the 3rd brother and the envoy of foreign enemies. It clearly states that he wants to use the 3 cities in the northern border as a proxy, to change the support of foreign enemies, and to mobilize private troops to force the palace. Such a great rebellious act is unwilling tolerated. Please ask the emperor to investigate the matter and add a Qingming festival in the court." The emperor received a secret letter and took a closer look. His face was instantly blue. He slapped the table and shouted angrily, "Zhang Wei, if this letter is true, I will not give up. Come on, summon the Ministry of Justice and the censors and the Taiwanese to verify it on the spot." Zhang Wei saw that his face was as white as paper, and he hurriedly explained, "Father, this must have been created by Zong Han. My minister is loyal, how could he do such a thing? I hope my father will be aware of it." However, at this time, Lord Shangshu of the Ministry of Personnel and Lord Zhou of the Ministry of War stood up at the same time and said loudly, "Father, every word that the Ninth Highness said is true. Old ministers and others have long heard that His Highness Zhang Wei has confronted foreign enemies and led private affairs. Today there are more iron certificates, and there are no cunning things to do. Please Zhang Wei strictly and to keep the court in full swing." The sound of the two elders instantly changed the wind in the court. The court officials who originally supported Zhang Wei had left the big show and kept silent. Several people even took the initiative to stand up to prove Zhang Wei's crimes. For a while, Zhang Wei was isolated and helpless, and was sweating profusely, and he could not say a word again. The emperor's eyes were as cold as a knife. He swept Zhang Wei and said in a deep voice, "Zhang Wei, what else can you say?" Zhang Wei sat on the ground, finally realizing that he had left his great fortune. He gritted his teeth and said loudly, "Father, my minister knows that it's wrong. Please give me your life." The emperor snorted coldly and said, "Come on, take Zhang Wei to the heavenly prison. After the verification is clear, then make a decision." His Liu investigated it all over again and would never tolerate it. With this order, Zhang Wei was dragged out of the hall by the servants, and the civil and military officials of the court were shocked. Zong Han stood there, calm on the surface, and a breath came out in his heart. He knew that in this battle, he finally defeated Zhang Wei. The pressure and trauma from many years have disappeared. A few days later, the investigation results of the Ministry of Justice and the censorate were found, and Zhang Wei was finally guilty of plagiarism and intentional rebellion. In a furious state, the emperor ordered Zhang Wei to be wiped out of his status as a prince and exiled him to a bitter and cold place, and he was eventually unable to return to the capital. All of his family members were also publicized, and several people were even punished. Zhang Wei's force in the court was uprooted, and he was filled with silence. At the same time, Zonghan's voice reached its peak. Not only did the elders in the court surrender, but the originally neutral court officials also began to show goodwill to him. The reputation of the northern frontier victory and the thunderous means in the court this time made everyone realize that His Royal Highness Ninth, who was once regarded as the Prince of the Waste, was no longer a weak boy of that year, but a strong man who was enough to shoulder the important tasks of the dynasty. One day, the emperor summoned Zong Han into the palace and summoned him to the imperial bookroom alone. When Zong Han entered the house, he only saw the emperor sitting behind the book. Although his face was still majestic, there was a little more gentle in his eyes. He raised his hand to signal Zong Han to sit down, and said in a deep voice, "Zong Han, I have been so neglecting you over the years. I never expected that you would achieve what you have today. In the battle of the northern border, you will defend our territory. In the court, you will reveal your crimes and protect the court. I feel very comforted." Zong Han quickly stood up and said respectfully, "Father is so serious. But I have done my best to do my best and dare not take credit for myself." The emperor took action and continued, "I am very pleased that you have this heart. Today, among the princes, only you have this understanding and strategy, which is enough to take on a great responsibility. My intention has been decided, and today I will sign you as the crown prince and inherit the great power. Do you have any disputes?" Zong Han was shocked. Although he had already predicted it, he still felt excited when he heard this. He immediately knelt down and said in a deep voice, "I thank my father for his grace. I will definitely not be in the hope of my father. I will do my best to create a prosperous era for our dynasty." The emperor clicked a little and showed a rare smile. "Okay, I believe in you. I will announce this matter tomorrow. You can go and prepare." At the next day, the emperor officially appointed Zonghan as the crown prince in front of the civil and military officials of the court. As the news came out, the government and the country were shocked and no one was dissatisfied. Zonghan was wearing the prince's robes and stood in the middle of the hall, accepting the worship of all officials, with a hint of determination and appearance in his eyes. He knew that at this moment, it was not only an improvement in status, but also an increase in responsibility. From the dying prince to the crown prince, he used his efforts and wisdom to completely change his fate. Several years later, the emperor was old and was in Zonghan. Zonghan officially ascended the throne and changed his reign to Yongsheng, and determined to create an unprecedented prosperous era. The first thing he did after ascending the throne was to appoint Zhihang as the chief minister, responsible for assisting the government. In terms of agriculture, Zonghan used modern knowledge to promote well practices in simple irrigation technology, and also introduced some agricultural designs from modern memory, which greatly improved the farmer's harvest. He ordered a reduction in tax exemption and encouraged the development of wasteland. In just a few years, the world was full of wealth and the people lived in peace and prosperity, and all the new emperor was benevolent. In military affairs, Zonghan used modern warfare to reform the military system and created a permanent army with exquisiteness as the core. He also used the knowledge in the toolbox to improve crossbow arrows and city defense fortifications, making the border defense line solid. There was no foreign invasion in the northern border again, and the surrounding small countries came to make a profit, and the creditors were taxed, and their national power was greatly boosted. In terms of economy, Zonghan encouraged the development of industry and commerce, opened multiple business roads, set up official markets, and regulated the circulation of currency. He also introduced some simple accounting methods to make the court's financial management more transparent and efficient. There are clouds in various places, and trades are prosperous. The capital has become the most prosperous place in the world. The night market is brightly lit and hot. Your Highness. No, Your Majesty, you are so destined to be destined. One day, Zhihang accompanied Zong Han to patrol the newly built irrigation canal, and looked at the fields where the rice waves were rolling around on both sides, and couldn't help but sigh. Who could have thought that when he was considered a prince, could lead us to such a prosperous era? I am so lucky to be able to assist Your Majesty. Zong Han smiled, patted Zhihang's shoulder, and spoke lightly. Zhihang, if it weren't for your loyal help, how could I have been today? In this prosperous era, it was not my own contribution, but the joint efforts of you and me, and the people of the world. Next, there is more to do, and we cannot slack off. Zhihang hurriedly bowed. What Your Majesty said is absolutely true. I will calm down and exhaust my energy and help Your Majesty create a glorious again. Time flies, and when Zong Han becomes the throne for 10 years. In his prime, the world was peaceful, the people were rich, and the national strength reached an unprecedented peak. Zonghan stood on the highest star platform in the palace, overlooking the bustling capital under his feet. He was surrounded by the noise of thousands of lights and the vast country in front of him. He was wearing a dragon robe and a crown on his head, and a look of sacred and satisfying were seen in his eyes. From a waste prince to an emperor today. Zong Han said in a low voice, his fingers gently swept over the small toolbox at his waist, and a smile appeared on the corner of his mouth. This fate is really wonderful. If it weren't for the time travel of that day, I would probably have turned into a piece of yellow soil in history, so how could I see this prosperous scene? He turned toward Zhihang beside him, and his language was filled with emotion. Zhihang, thank you for your hard work in these years. I had no time that year, and it was you who accompanied me through that darkest day. Now that the country has been settled, I can still be worthy of this world and myself. Zhihang hurriedly bowed, and his words were respectfully warm. Your Majesty is so harsh. You can see that Your Majesty has moved from the ultimate state to the peak. There is no regret in this life. This prosperous era was transformed by Your Majesty with wisdom and courage. Everyone in the world is grateful for your kindness. Zong Han clicked a little and his eyes turned away again. The night wind blew lightly, and took the slump of his dragon robe. The moonlight shone on his face, reflecting a pair of bright and fixed eyes. He knew that this fate of the country and this fate had been completely rewritten by him. And he himself grew from a forgotten prince to a wise king and was famous in history. It's the Japanese that have grown, and the prosperity has just begun. Zong Han said in a low voice, with endless passion and expectation in his voice. He turned down the star platform, his back looked particularly tall under the moonlight, as if it was blended with this country. At this moment, what belongs to him finally put a perfect sentence in his painting.